Hey, hey, hey.
Hey, Colin,
Good to
looking
see you
great
again.
as usual.
Same to
Mhm.
you. I like that
Yeah,
shirt.
yeah, thank you. It's my sexy shirt. It makes me look like I have stuff I don't.
Uh,
I guess what the secret is out of the bag right now. So,
no, you look wonderful. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to have another conversation. Welcome to Office Hours. I'm excited to get going today.
awesome, awesome, awesome. Love it.
Well,
So,
yeah, let's kick this off. I was wanting to kind of share with you before we kind of get into the show something that's just been on my mind lately because I feel like we're starting to hit a rhythm of doing this, and I'm thinking about inviting guests in and all the different things that we could do. I've been doing a lot of thoughts on just reflective on like personal branding and you know my personal brand, your personal brand. I've been thinking about this a lot, and one of the things that I've been thinking about is I see all these people on LinkedIn or on the wider social media who seem to like all preach or, promote. It seems like they've figured it all out. That's kind of what I've been taking. I feel like for a long time I've been an observer of this space, but never too much of an actual contributor as me. So now that kind of flipping the script and being more of a contributor and trying to contribute to that space, been reflecting a lot on what other people are saying and how they're kind of positioning their personal brand. Um, and I just wanted to kind of ask you because I was thinking about you and thinking about what you thought about this. If somebody 10 years younger, I'm a little about 10 years older than you, so I'm curious to what you would say. If someone 10 years younger came to you and said, "Oh, Shane, I see what you're doing. I want to aspire to be something like you when I grow up. Uh, how should I spend my time and what should I do?" How would you answer? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you would answer that question.
hmm. Yeah, wow, that's a great question. You've really been thinking a lot. All right, great. I hope I don't disappoint you with my
There's no
answer.
right answer. And also, to be honest, someone's asked me that. So I've had to kind of think about it. And I also see a lot of people who are a lot younger than me building personal brands, preaching. And it's made me think about like, what's the point of a personal brand other than trying to help other people essentially preach, I guess, your value system a little bit, or like what brought you to where you're at. So I'm just curious here, like, O'Shane, how do I become like you? How should I spend my time, and what how would you advise me on what I should do?
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Well, first, I don't really want anybody to be like me. I'm not that great. If you can aim a little higher, I think that would work out better for you. But in my experience, I've found the greatest value being in a whole ton of networking. No, it's always been my natural bent to connect, to talk to people, get to know them. Well, I started a kind of a group. So I started a youth group centered around motivation and entertainment and event planning and that sort of stuff. So I had some sort of purpose, or I had a direct vision. I had a need to connect with people. All right. So I would say, like, find something that, this is so cliche, but find something worth doing. Find something worth working on that's not just about you, but involves other people, whether it be some kind of software or platform that other people can use, or a community that other people can join, or an event, a yearly event, monthly event that other people can attend. And that will give you a legitimate reason to keep talking to people. That's step one. Step two is the more people you talk to, the more you will see common themes in the conversations, and what people ask you to do or help them with. So in networking, it'll kind of come to the forefront of what you're pretty much good at, or what people need, or what they think you're good at, or how they perceive you. And so in my networking, people would tend to start to see me as somebody who has the mic, maybe hosting an event, being at the forefront in media and entertainment. And I went to school for HR, right? That's literally a in the back type of job. But I found myself outside of classes, it was media and entertainment. And fast forward 7, 8 years later, I'm working with a radio station, and I'm co-hosting a podcast with you, Colin. And so first, have something to work on. Second, network a whole ton, and people will kind of help you to see what you're good at or what you're pulled towards. And then from there, look at the common themes, I'd say, and pinpoint your timeline, various elements, various events of significance, and then cross-reference them and see where do all these events and instances intersect. And that right there in the middle is going to be very closely tied, if not your personal brand, right there in the middle. So I'd say it takes time, but do a ton load of networking, and other people will tell you, because there's no point to a personal brand if other people aren't engaging with it. That's the whole point of a brand. It's for other people to understand how to interpret you. You already know who you are, right? There's no value of you necessarily, interacting with your own brand. It's the whole point is for other people to interact with you. So take cues from other people. All right. So that's what I'd say.
I like that answer. Now, follow up. What would be the number one habit that you think somebody needs to acquire? Because I agree. I think you hit that out of the park. I think that was a great answer. But there's so much within that, and it takes 7 years. Okay, that's great. What's the number one habit that I, as someone younger, should do or build or focus on to be able to, aspire to land in that type of situation?
In that type of situation, I would say self-reflection, taking time to pull away from the speed and rush of everyday life and reflect, think. You can only connect the dots looking backwards. So take time to pull away from your computer, from your tablet, from your phone. Pull away from work, or when you're finished with work, take some time, pull away from everybody, from family, from your friends, and find a quiet space by yourself. I think nature is really helpful, going outside, maybe taking a walk in the park, and really just think. If you're religious, pray, ask God, to tell you, to speak to you. And just take that time to slow down so you can hear, because you can't hear very well when you're going 100 miles an hour. You can't, because you're trying to stay on the road. You're trying to not crash, right? Or crash out. So if you can slow down, then you'll find that you start to notice things about yourself and reflect on past experiences, and you can gain wisdom from that. Because wisdom isn't just like having knowledge. Wisdom is applied knowledge. It's knowledge that has been assessed and reflected on. You can't do that if you're always going. So I think that's maybe the number one thing to practice. Daily meditation, taking time to slow down and really reflect on who you are, where you're from, and where you're going. Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to be totally honest with you, and I'm not just saying this for the cameras. I almost like have a little bit of goosebumps in the sense that your answers are like exactly the answers that I kind of like came to on my own when I was thinking about like, how do I synthesize, just like thinking for myself, like what would be the advice in that situation? If somebody said that, well, because some people did say that to me, and I'm about 10 years older than you. So the synthesized version of it is, I was actually trying to think about this. Like, I think about it not just from like all the things that I've studied and learned, but kind of looking at a lot of my peers, like, just friends growing up, like, what's the difference between the ones that were able to kind of figure it out and the ones that weren't? Just kind of thinking about that. And I would say the number one answer that I kind of came to was pattern recognition. And how do you get better at pattern recognition? Self-reflection. Like those two things, I think, are the difference maker. So you kind of hit the nail on the head on that. I don't really, and to be honest, you're actually mature in the sense that I don't even know if I would have given that answer as maturely as you did 10 years ago. I only do that because I feel like not a lot of people talk about that. And I think you're absolutely right. I know some people I know I feel like are just not good at pattern recognition. I think a lot of it has to do with maybe some of it's like IQ. Some of it's like people don't really like aren't able to think about it. But I actually don't think that that's true. I think it's a lot of it is, I don't know. I haven't really thought of like the right word for it. I want to say maybe cultural, like nature versus nurture. Some people don't have like, what the saying is like, you are the sum of your 5 friends. So like you are, I've like learned that a lot of times we get our a lot of our thoughts are not our thoughts. They're like the reflection of thoughts that are around us.
Yeah.
Right. So then the question becomes, well, what are you intaking? And for certain people, that's not necessarily their fault, just based off their culture, their family history. I even see it, to be honest, with people that I've worked with all over the world in like different cultures. Some people are a little bit more like outwardly spoken versus more like inwardly spoken. So it's like they don't really their culture is not one that's like friction based, for like sharing their internal thoughts as much. I think all of those things, if you don't do that, it makes it harder to do pattern recognition. And so like a lot of times for the ones that I feel like a lot of my peers or people that I feel like haven't really figured it out, a lot of it's because I could have it's like cause and effect, right? Like that's a real thing. Like certain habits and actions create the outcomes. Even in your story, it's like you got to go to the networking events and you got to prioritize networking to be able to land in a situation in which me and you are here, like on both of
Yeah.
our parts. Like otherwise, this wouldn't happen unless we prioritize networking. So there's a cause and then there's an effect. And I find that a lot of people aren't thinking about how their habits and like the inputs are going to create the outputs that they want. And the reality is I can point to so many things that I did wrong, but like the self-reflection aspect of it, I did feel like I do that. I do process and try to be as objective as I can, to kind of think through how I could have acted differently in different instances to try to, improve, let's just say. And certain people totally have that, and some people do not, or they don't even think about it. To be totally honest, it's not even on the radar. Why? I don't know. Maybe it's IQ, maybe it's culture. I don't know the answer to that. But yeah, I like this. The reason I kind of been thinking about this is because I see all these people who basically preach seemingly like they figured it all out. And as somebody that is older than a lot of these people and honestly like more educated and like have probably done more just because of like my age, I don't want to preach that I figured it all out because I just don't even think that that's really authentic. Because I don't feel like I figured it all out. I actually feel like the people who preach that they figure it all out are not working on interesting stuff. That's kind of like the way that I see it. It's like if you've said that you figure it all out, you're probably not innovating. That's the way I see it. You're probably just kind of doing what everybody else is doing, and therefore you figured it all out. If you're going to try to do something that is like hard or challenging, you shouldn't have it figured out. That's kind of like how you have to go through life. Having like I'm making it up as I go, but I'm trying to like innovate. So anyways, I was just reflective on that. So it's like, how do you kind of share that story? But I thought that your answer was perfect. Like that's, to be honest, I didn't know what you were going to say, but yeah, I feel the same way. It's like, how do you get better at pattern recognition based off of what you want? Because it's important to kind of start with the end in mind. Like, well, not everybody wants the same thing. So understanding what success looks like to you, getting good at pattern recognition, and how do you get better at pattern recognition is, reflective. Try to source out people who might know, and not saying that everyone has the answers, but like trying to take parts of what people have said and try to figure out the patterns of like, well, this person did, like for both of us, networking is a big thing. Like like we are not going to probably build businesses online. It's going to be harder to build businesses online, let's just say, if you're not into networking, because it's a globalized world of connectivity. But if you don't want to put yourself out there, build brand, try to create inbound, probably not going to find success at it. Yeah, cool. I appreciate those insights.
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's a very, I think that's probably one of the best questions we all should ask. Right? How can we improve? How can we get better at at building a personal brand, right? Because
Yeah.
we'll all be known for something, right?
Especially in this world of AI. The reason is one of the reasons that it's been on my mind is that I've had a few different conversations with people who will come on the show. They're starting to think a lot about their personal brand. It's like a niche now, especially with these AI tools and like the ability to be a creator and the ability to
Mhm.
write. It's more about like what we have been talking about. It becomes a lot more about like creative taste. Like, well, what do you want to be known for? Like, what's your message, right? Because yeah, like you no longer, it's not hard to write, but like, what are you going to say? That's the question. What are you trying to say to differentiate yourself? What's your message?
Mhm.
And again, there's no right or wrong answer to that. That's why I was reflective, and I kind of wanted to. I was actually curious to hear, like, what was your answer to that question? Like, what would be your message to somebody who looked up to you as like having maybe figured out some things? What's the wisdom?
Mhm.
Because that's the way I kind of think about my trying to like build a personal brand. Is like how am I speaking at least to like the in my head at least, like the version of myself that's 10 years younger.
Oh, okay, nice. 10 years ago, I was 19. What would I say to myself at 19? Oh, I definitely know. Like, I'd say, calm down. Like, calm the heck down, bro. Slow down a little bit more. Like, I was very, I would say, it's not overbearing, but I was very enthusiastic. Let's just say that. And it was misinterpreted sometimes. I was excited about life. Still am. But now I've learned to channel it a little bit more. Husa.
Yeah.
All right. Okay,
I think
great.
it's important to be excited about life. I share those characteristics. And I would say I would give, well, actually, I would say my 30-year-old self, I would say maybe like chill out. But it was, I don't know, to be honest, I felt like the world's changing because you now see so many other people that it's like within the human, like it's part of the human experience to compare yourself to all these people that you're seeing. And that like didn't exist when I was 19 because
Mm,
it just didn't, none of that existed. So like, to be honest, like 19, I just wasn't even like, it wasn't on my radar, like entrepreneurship, growing on like building businesses online. It just wasn't like a thing that anybody spoke about, but it started becoming a thing about 10 years ago. Uh, that was when I kind of started thinking at least about building businesses. So it was, but like not like personal brands. That was still wasn't really a thing. That's only
mm,
I feel like happening now. That's like the pattern that I see. Where it's like now everyone's a personal brand, whether or not you want to be or not. It's just a matter of like who's realizing that and wanting to, who's recognizing that pattern and wanting to do a little bit of self reflection on like, hey, I should probably, this is going to happen regardless. I should probably think about um, how am I positioning myself a little bit? What is my message?
Yeah, exactly. Not everybody, I think, wants a personal brand. I think there are people who are content with staying in the shadows, with just not being seen, not being heard, just doing their, job, whatever career field they're in, and being content with working till retirement and just disappearing into the tropics or so, I think there are
Yeah.
people like that. And I don't think it's necessarily bad because this whole world is an ecosystem, and you're gonna have predators, you're gonna have prey, you're gonna have flora and fauna. Everybody plays a part. We do need people to be committed to their jobs as employees and stay there in those jobs and get good at it. And we do need people who are going to be entrepreneurs, who are going to innovate and iterate and come up with new inventions that change the world. I think we all need each other, and being aware of that, I think, gives more confidence because you're not second guessing yourself, thinking, should I be an employee or should I be an entrepreneur? Like, no, you know where you are, where you stand. And from there, you can start to grow like a tree planted by the rivers of waters, right? You have constant nourishment because you're firmly planted in your beliefs about yourself. So I don't think everybody's gonna have a personal brand, right? yeah, but I think, wherever you are, I think just ensure you know or feel confident with where you are. And if you're not, then hey, refine it. I guess you have some more reflection to go through. Go for it. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to shake things up so that you can get to that place where you can be confident in where you are, and where you're going. Good stuff. Good stuff. Good stuff. That brings to mind, LinkedIn has become such a wonderful environment for people refining their personal brand, and as well as refining their careers. But I find a lot of people come to LinkedIn with strategies that don't always work, right, or work very well. And I guess we also need persons who have, crappy strategies as well, because that shines the light on people who do have good strategies, right? And we can help each other. Oh, but there's a couple strategies that come to mind. I think there's like maybe like three main categories of people on LinkedIn who are strategizing, or maybe trying to get out there in some way. I think there are people who they all they do is outreach. They're always connecting, always networking, right? But they don't have any content, all right? So when somebody connects, they're kind of confused as to, okay, what's the value that this person brings, or are they just trying to sell me something? But then on the other end of the spectrum, there's people who all they do is post content and they don't reach out to anybody. So, right? So their ideal customer profile can actually see what they're offering, all right, and engage. So they're like a little disappointed that they're not making money. They're doing all this posting, not making any money, all right. And I think there's maybe like a subset of the content creators who are focused on building their personal brand, like we're talking about here, just their personal brand, polishing it, making themselves look as amazing, clean, well put together as possible. But the content is I just think the content is just too perfect, right? The imagery is too perfect, and it lacks a little bit of personality, a little bit of warmth, right? And then they're not doing outreach either. They're just kind of hoping that if I make this rock as shiny as possible, it'll just attract everybody, right? And they'll come in by the droves, and pay me money because I have this amazing personal brand. So I think there's three sets of people on LinkedIn, and I think they're kind of like, not balancing these well enough. I think we need a little bit of all three. Outreach, content, and also personal branding. So, what are your thoughts? What comes to mind? What jumps out at you out of those three strategies that people apply, Colin?
I see them all. One of the big things in my marketing career that I feel like I always kind of go back to is this concept of push versus pull marketing. Um, you know, are you pushing messages out or are you trying to pull people in? And I'm not saying that there are a right or wrong answer to that, but both are arguably important, right? To get brand awareness, you want to push a lot of stuff out, but to get an audience, especially an engaged audience, you want to pull people in. So your tactics and content change depending on what you're trying to do. You could do outreach in a push style or a pull style. You could do content in a push style or a pull style, or you could do personal branding in a push or pull style. It's more about the messaging, the positioning, the cadence, the strategy that you're implementing. And I find that most people don't think about that side of it. And oftentimes I find that they're not doing a good enough balance. So they're pushing a lot of stuff that nobody really cares about. So it's just push, 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 thinking that something magically is going to happen. Or they're trying a little bit, maybe like it's all pull, but it becomes a little too personal. So they're not really pushed, like no one really understands. It comes across as like this person's only really talking about themselves. And it does, I don't really understand what they offer, what they do. They're not pushing anything that even explains it. It's just, a personal blog. And again, I'm not saying one is not right or wrong. I think it's important to start with the end goal in mind. What conversions are you seeking? And what are you trying to use the platforms for? And then work backwards to kind of understand, well, what tactical strategies make the most sense to implement in like a push and pull style.
Yeah, awesome. That comes back to pattern recognition that you
Yeah.
mentioned. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's
Well,
kind of tied in a little bit.
yeah, and also reflective, right? Because it's an iterative process to be able to kind of see, depending on the market, like, well, what's the right balance? Like for some of my clients, like the way I think about it when I'm either doing ghostwriting or kind of helping craft post or content, it's always, I think people like behind the scenes type stuff. So to your point of just some rawness, I think people like that. But if you want to polish up that's fine in like a personal brand way. But having some authenticity around like what you're doing behind the scenes. I see this a lot where people will have, high resolution imagery that look like a professional of like an event that they did, and they're pushing out all like professional events. But I view that as like somewhat interesting because you get behind the scenes type stuff. But when you only do that and you don't share any stories, like it's hard to pull people in because I see it, but I don't really care or know. It looks like they had a great event. That's the way I feel when I see that, but I don't really know anything about them. So I also like when then people share some stories in their posts about lessons learned, something that they had to overcome, how they were thinking one way about a particular event and it shifted into like meaning something differently in their career or in their engagement with their employee or their client. I find that type of stuff interesting. I actually feel like I get to know that person through writing a lot easier, that they're more enjoyable to follow. But you see, one's like a push style and one's a pull style. And I think it's kind of nice to have both of those elements in a personal brand. That, to be honest, I find that most people don't even really think that way. They just don't. Whenever I kind of talk to them, they're either just pushing stuff with
Yeah,
no pull, or they're pulling really hard and not having a balance. And it's, what they're pulling is not that what they think that they're pulling from a storytelling standpoint is not that interesting, or it's kind of the same thing over and over again. There's no diversity of thought or opinion to make them feel like they're a more well-rounded human being.
yeah. That's major, Colin. Yeah, I've been so guilty. I've been more of a push strategy because of my line of work. Marketing campaigns, automation, that kind of stuff. So I'm literally paid to push,
Yeah.
paid to push. But I've been recently learning that it's so important to bring in some pull elements as well, meaning create content. I think content is a great way to pull.
Yeah.
Outreach pushes. I think outreach can also pull if your messaging is very inviting, but I think content also pulls very well. And so there needs to be some kind of a balance. And then maybe right in the middle there is your personal brand. I think that kind of helps people to experience you before their money is on the line, right? Before their credit
Yeah.
card is on the line, before they're supposed to pay for a service or something. Because people want to know that they know who they're spending their money with to validate that they're making a good decision, right? Like who's gonna admit to spending money with somebody they don't even know or trust, right? That doesn't even begin to make sense. So people need a reason to say yes, I'm making a good financial decision by purchasing this service or purchasing this person's product because I know them. I've seen their content. I know their personality. I can trust them. They're good at what they do. I like their content, and so I'm gonna put my money on the line. So I think I think that's missing from the I guess the strategies a lot of people put out there. That little piece right there that influences the buying decision. I think that's missing. You know.
I agree. I always like to tell people when I'm trying to training them about LinkedIn, especially like in the DMs, like how do you have good, thoughtful, productive, progressive conversations in the DMs? I always equate it to if you watch like a ballroom dance or like a two partners dancing. This is where the concept of like I think about push and pull. The beauty in their performance is in the fact that they change it up and they're doing it they're playing off of one another. So you can't always if a dancer was always doing one type of thing to one tempo for let's say 2 minutes straight, 3 minutes straight, as the audience you would get a little bored of what they're doing and not really understand what you're watching. But the fact that they change up the tempo and they do some push, they do some pull, they do some throwing up in the air, all of a sudden it becomes more of you become a more captive audience by at the end of it, you're like, I'm pleased with what I just witnessed. That then you applaud because you kind of see the art of what they're doing in doing it together. Now, when you try to apply that to a conversation, you want to have a combination of push and pull, right? Yes, you need to push out a connection request and not push out your offer, but push out the ability of desire to connect. And then you want to try to pull people in once they connect with you by maybe introducing yourself or asking them a question, right? Because you're curious about the other person. So you're pulling them in. So you push something out, you pull them in, and then you might, depending on the dance that happens, it might make sense to push something again and then maybe pull again and then push and then pull. And then eventually after it kind of dies down, if you want to push and pull, you might share an article, something value driven to say, hey, I saw you, right? I'm going to push this out, but the goal is to pull you in. The art of being able to do that somewhat successfully is what allows people to feel like they get to know you through the subtleties in the similar way that you're like an audience is watching your performance. I feel like people don't think of a conversation like a dance, and they're thinking of it more as a solo performance versus realizing that there's a partner that you're interacting with, right? This isn't a stage for you to dance and think that somebody's going to say, oh, I'm going to read all of this. Let me stand up and clap. It's thinking about it like a ballroom dance, and you're trying to dance with a partner here. So the audience, if somebody was watching this conversation, are they captivated by what's happening? And if the answer is no, you should probably rethink maybe some of this pull and push strategies of how you're going about this. I do that with content too.
Wow, that's very interesting. As you're speaking about dance, I think that's how all movement in the human body takes place. It's either a push or a pull. Like you push to step forward, to take a step with your right, but then you need to pull to get your foot up to make the next step, right? Your whole body is a combination of pushes and pulls. Even getting out of bed is push and pull. Getting up from this seat, from this chair is push and pull. Swinging on a monkey bar is push and pull. In the gym, push and pull. All right, so it's interesting how I think it was Myron Golden who said there's this law of physics that says everything is a microcosm of each other or something like that. So what I understand is that a concept that applies in the natural world or in nature applies also in the world of conversation as well, in the intangible world. All right. Laws of sowing and reaping, for example, that if you plant a mango seed, you're expected to get a mango plant. You're not going to get corn or apples, right? If you sow or plant, I guess goodwill. If you sow or plant, I guess good work, hard work, then you're supposed to reap some kind of reward that's connected to that hard work, not something totally different, right? So it's just very interesting um, that you mentioned, push and pull, because it's
Yeah.
the same in the physical world
Yeah.
as in the. I think language is spiritual because you can't see.
Hmm.
So I just say spiritual. You
Yeah.
can see it's the same in the spiritual world, push and
I
pull.
it's also is trying to mimic the art of creating a relationship with somebody that would come natural, because you're right that it's like a natural part of the physical world when you're at like a networking event, that you would have like a dialogue that would be a combination of push pull, listen, active listening. But then
Yeah,
when for whatever reason, because there's no like actual physical person on the screen, a lot of people just default to full push.
push.
Most people are just push, 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 push. Um, or maybe a little too pull, 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 pull. And they don't really think of the art of the dance. And I find that that is applicable to content strategy, right? Because people always will ask, um, what type of content should I do? And it's
Mm.
like, you want to do a variety if you can. I mean, even with us, we're doing the show, but we want to invite guests on, right? Because inviting guests on is a pull strategy. Right now, we're trying to make relevant enough uh, content and like advice that will pull people in, but we are pushing a lot of stuff out because it's just us, which is fine, I think, for a while. But the art of what we both agree on kind of naturally is that, hey, we should invite other people on, because there would increase the chances of, well, not only literally pulling other people in one by one, which is a good start, but then sharing and amplifying other people, showing that we want to do that will pull other people in. So it's like, my point is, people don't think of it as this push and pull mindset, but it comes very natural to sales oriented marketers, because it's relationship building. Is because we
Mm.
want to find the balance. We feel naturally that we're doing a little too much of one thing, so we want to adapt and have that self reflection to say, hey, we want to find the balance of creating in a vibe with the audience. And how do we create a vibe with the audience, even if we never meet the audience, is if we think with them in mind, because we're having a nice combination of push and pull, and thinking about this as like creating a captive audience in the same way that ballroom dancers do behind the scenes. They're trying to think about like what would look good for the audience. Like their audience, when they give that performance, uh, the amount of times that they've done that and thought through that moment, and it's usually like 3 minutes, is all for the audience at the end of the day, right? It's to try to show them the elegance of kind of what they can do together. And then it's like a moment in time that everybody feels that way, because they're watching these two people who have put so much energy and effort into something that you can't help but stand up and clap.
Yeah, and appreciate that. That's
Yeah, you
good.
appreciate it.
I've never been ballroom dancing before. That's we don't do much of that kind of dancing in Jamaica. In Jamaica, we do different kinds of dancing that's not
Fair
appropriate
enough.
for the ballroom. But is that something you did in high school, or is that a part
No, but have you ever seen the show like So You Think You Can Dance?
you
Have you
think
ever
I've
on
heard of
TV?
it? I don't think
It's
I've.
like different styles. If you like, I mean, one is there's hip hop dancing. It's just it's a dance competition with partners, or even if you like Dancing with the Stars. Have you heard of
Dancing with
that?
the Stars, yeah,
Yeah,
I've
it's the
seen
same
that.
concept, right? You have it's partner dancing with different styles. You have usually on so you think you can dance was two people that knew what they were doing, versus Dancing with the Stars is one person who knows what they're doing and one person who's giving it their best. So
Mhm.
you're judging. It's a little bit different of judging, but on So You Think You Can Dance, it was really like professional dancers like doing it together, um, which they have some of that like on Dancing with the Stars type stuff. But yeah, it's like that's what I have in mind. It's like partner dances where it's like you usually have like a man or a woman, or to be honest, it can be two men or two women. It's like the art of doing it together and staying in sync, and really being cognizant of not only what you're doing, but what you're doing in relation to the other person.
Yeah,
That's kind of the art of it. Not thinking just about, this is not a solo performance. And if you're doing things that your partner is not doing, the audience feels a disjointed part of what's happening here. It's the same thing with conversations, at least, even in the DMs. And I think that it still applies when it comes to like content strategy, personal branding, and just kind of like, trying to build some type of relationship with an audience by having some type of like expectation of, if they follow you, what is like, are you creating content for them, with them in mind, at least?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Interesting. This is good stuff. This is good stuff right here. And these are things that I think everybody could, make use of, not just entrepreneurs or those building a personal brand on LinkedIn. But I think people in corporate, I don't think they, I could be wrong, but I don't think they value these concepts as much because their livelihood is not necessarily on the line for it's not like they're depending on a business to take care of their family. They have good stable jobs, and so I don't think the pressure is there to, or
So
the pull is there to excel.
So this is what I was talking about before. I 100% agree with you, but I feel like we're kind of starting to adapt in the market that, like it or not, if it's two people within a corporate world that are up for a promotion and one person has an active personal brand and the other one is not, this is a new world we live in, right? Because the people who are making decisions might look at that person, well, one's talking about the company and out and like is meeting people, and the other one literally might be doing that, just doesn't have it active. So I actually believe that we're entering in this world where, you're right, you started with the premise that some people just want to stay behind the scenes. That's fine, especially in the corporate world. Like, no one's going to force you to do that, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be judged based off of people who might have taken a different path, even within your company. Because at the end of the day, this is an ecosystem where people are being judged, no matter if you like it or not, and being put up for promotion. So yeah, I agree with you that startups, founders, consultants, people who are business oriented have more reason to want to put themselves out there, for sure. But we're also entering a world where, even within a corporate world, some people are like fine or still want to create a personal brand. Does that mean that you have to? No. But if I was in charge and I saw two people and on paper they were pretty much equal, but one had a more active online presence that we could kind of like rally behind to get them to maybe talk about what we're doing, I would probably, from a business stance, especially over the next 5-10 years, say, hey, well, this person has a big head start with, especially if they have a network filled with all of they're connected with all the clients in the market. They're getting on speaking gigs. It's like, well, they're going to conferences. I don't know. I feel like we're entering into a world where I actually feel like those people are still going to get ahead, even in the corporate world, because not everybody. Some people are more enjoying the process, let's just say, of building personal brands, and it's never been easier with AI to kind of not need to. You could kind of do it yourself. Let's just say with phones, AI, free tools. It's no longer there's no technical gap like it used to be, where it was like, well, I'm not going to sit and learn how to video edit. But now it's like, well, you don't need to. It's like, oh, okay. Well, if I don't need to video edit, I don't need to know design. Well, now it's just a flat fee for certain software that I just need to learn how to use. And so that barrier to entry is so low that, especially as kids, young adults, people in their 20s and 30s, and even in like to their 40s that have kind of grown up with this, are starting to reach positions of power. They're being judged by their peers, and not everybody has that mindset of like, well, I want to fly under the radar.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurial, they want to work for the company, but they still are okay with like creating a personal brand.
Absolutely. I think the subset of corporate that it doesn't pay enough attention to even LinkedIn I think I think a lot of times they end up having to come back around, but they come back when it's kind of too late. They maybe come back around when they're job hunting again, right? They're everything is all nice and dandy until their job is on the line. Then they start connecting on LinkedIn. Then they start sending connection invites, and the open to work badge goes on their profile picture. And I'm thinking, hey, why not dig your well before you get thirsty? You know what I mean? Like, think ahead. Why not? If you're in IT, for example, I mean, people lose their jobs every day. People transition, and people get offers all the time. Like, why not build a network of potential employers in IT just in case. All right, when the time comes, it could be 3 4 years down the line, you already have those relationships with companies that are just waiting for you to quit, get fired so they can hire you because you've built a relationship. Right.
Absolutely. Um, as someone that worked in corporate, I understand those people pretty well.
Yeah.
It's not that they are ambitious. So it's not that those people aren't ambitious. They are ambitious. And it's not that those people are unwilling to put themselves out there. There are. It's just that what those people are that are different than I think entrepreneurs is they're a little bit more risk adverse and they're a lot more strategic. Because I actually think that for the right job, it's way more strategic as a career. You have a better like work life balance, and um, it's a lot less risk adverse, especially in America, because you're governed by so many more laws, like employment laws, right? So if you get a corporate job, it's like, let's just say it's a little bit harder to fire you. I'm not saying it's impossible, but if you're strategic in, let's say, picking the right industry, right, that is growing, that the company is doing well, and you pick a company that is doing well, and you're in the team, you have a lot more job security. Let's just say that than being an entrepreneur or being a founder. And it's like, well, that is very risky, and nobody
Mhm.
cares about you, and it's totally not secure.
Yeah.
So that attracts a certain type of personality type that's more risk, like that's okay with risk, and is more wants more upside. But like in corporate America, you can have a great career. So the reason I say that is because I actually feel like as time goes on and these tools and everything becomes a little bit more easier, well, now all of a sudden you're the ecosystem that you're playing within shrinks a little bit because you're just kind of working within that corporate environment, but you're still competing in an ecosystem. So you're still, John is still competing with Sally for the promotion. So you're not competing against globally, right? Like a founder where it's like, well, you're competing against everybody. That's,
Yeah.
a little bit more challenging, but like there's still ambition and risk associated within that. If Sally is very active on social media and John is not, uh, you might have a few years to build up, but that dynamic is kind of where I see personal brands becoming like a distinguishing factor, especially if you're trying to think through how do you use LinkedIn, Instagram to, get more savvy strategically at how to do it, right? That doesn't mean that you need to like what you had said in your three categories, like one of them is to be really refined versus somewhat authentic, like finding the balance within that. You don't need to share your kids or your wife or if all of your hobbies or things like that, but trying to find the balance of showing that you are a well-rounded human being who is an active networker and wants to connect with people on LinkedIn or Instagram, and is willing to maybe create some TikToks. It just demonstrates that you're a certain type of, it creates a personal brand that people kind of identify you as somebody that might be articulate or well written or a good dresser or like certain types of hobbies to make it easier to create inbound for yourself within the corporate world to say, oh, I saw that you were golfing. I like golf too. Maybe we should play golf, right? So it's like thinking about the strategies behind that. I always found that it's not that like, well, when I was in corporate America, it wasn't like a thing as much, especially in the older generation, because nobody did it. But now that's kind of how people are following people. So it's like you got to have some presence, or else it's just going to be harder for you to like connect with people. I'm not saying it's impossible. You can obviously do it. Humans have been doing it for a really long time. It's just a lot easier to put yourself out there in a curated way, to think through how to create inbound for yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, lots to consider and think about. We're in a new world. We're in a new world that is highly digitized. And before you know it, we're having Pursue networking, office hours, hologram style. your 3D hologram right here on my desk, and you're seeing me, right? And it's just absolutely nuts. Before you know it, we're doing this show with virtual reality headsets, and we're talking to each. I'm seeing you in my headset. There's no computer. There's nothing. I'm in my couch, and I'm seeing you in my headset, and vice versa. All right, and so I can just imagine what social media is going to be like as we go deeper into this AI and virtual reality world, bolstered by technology. And what needs to change, Colin? What needs to change as we go deeper into technology? What is going to change and what's not going to change?
That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. You got to control the controllables. So I would say I like to focus on you got to instead of trying to understand predict what's going to change. I actually like to look at like what's not going to change.
Going to change, yeah.
That's actually, to be honest, how I got here. Because that's what I did 10 years ago when I said, well, what's not going to change? In my opinion, I think that social media is not going to, it's going to be here. I don't know what it's going to become, but it's not going away, which is why I kind of jumped on the ship of riding the wave of LinkedIn. So I would say I would encourage people to ride the wave instead of trying to predict, well, in the future, this is going to happen, and saying, all right, what's not going to change? I think people are always going to want to connect with people.
Yeah.
I don't know how or what the mechanism is, but people like networking with people. I think social media broadly is going to continue to be present. So I would say what's not going to change is your need to get somewhat proficient at putting yourself out there.
Yeah, I think human nature is not going to change either. People want to be recognized, people want to be appreciated, and people want to know you're talking directly to them, and not just from a pulpit, to everybody screaming at a crowd, but that you're connecting individually, one-on-one. Whether you're in corporate or you're in the entrepreneurial world, I think human nature is not going to change either. So get good with people. I always tell my friends, get good with people.
Yeah, I agree. Well, also it's about getting good at understanding how people navigate. Like, to be honest, even kind of like the pattern recognition around the push versus pull, like that's not going to change. Like people like want people need dance partners in different ways. That might be business relationships, personal relationships, communities of like-minded people, like in specific hobbies. Like people need other people. That's like a pattern that I don't think that's not only not, it's essential. If anything, that's what I actually think. If you're asking what changed, I actually think it might be more of that, because we've been so isolated that I actually think that certain software and platforms are actually trying to make it easier for people to connect in different ways. So if anything, there might be more connective opportunities, let's just say. I don't know what that would look like, but if you're connecting with people, understanding how to come across and not just push your message, but pull people in, that push-pull style of, being somebody worth connecting with, let's just say, being able to tell stories, being able to share your story, being able to actively listen. Those patterns are not only not changing, I actually think that people are losing, a sense of how to do that in a strange way. I actually view my generation, you're kind of in the middle of that generation, is going to have to teach the younger generation how to be social, because I grew up playing outside and needed, like, that was like my life. So it was like
Yeah.
we didn't have this stuff. So it was like you had to go ride your bike and like knock on the door of someone next door and say, hey, can, you know, James come out to play? Like I had to I lived that life. Even in like up to high school, it was like we had to get together without video calls, or any of that stuff. It just didn't exist. We had a lot of human to human interactions that I just feel like after COVID and the younger generation with all this like weird interactivity of like Snapchat and like social, where you feel like you're present with somebody, but you're not
Yeah.
actually
Or
present
not
with.
really. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're not really. And it's like, and it's curated. So it's not like real. You're not reading body language as much as when like you're in situations, and inflection of tone, that type of stuff. I feel like is starting to weirdly get lost in the next generation. I feel like it's actually
Mhm.
one of the duties of the millennials to kind of try to, as the world continues to be lit on fire by like the boomers, and eventually when they go away and the generation X and millennials hopefully kind of like come in to save the day.
Yeah.
um, One of the things that I think that is going to be like our generation's trait that we're going to have to help the younger generation is social cohesiveness. Just because it's ingrained in us, because it's always been that way. It's not like something special. Like we had that, but I can sense that the communication styles, let's just say, of the younger generation are like totally warped. I even see this by working with people through all of these systems. I've actually given advice to people where I say, look, I think, I'm just being honest with you, I think the best advice I could give you is to get an in-person job. Like, stop doing this remote stuff, because I don't really get it. I don't really know how to change it, but like I feel like you need to watch a high functioning person like interact with other people, and like
Mhm.
how to be diplomatic and communicative and respectful but forceful at the same time. Like, I don't know, like I kind of see some of these like young people, 23, 24, and I start thinking about it. And I was like, well, to be honest, they probably haven't even worked in an office because of COVID. And then they are, I like the Zoom thing of getting off and then not watching how people act afterwards. So like your is warping, I think, the way that you actually come across, and the perception in which you have of like, to be honest, even with me, what I am doing afterwards. Because I see this all the time with people, like especially younger generations. Like we
Yeah.
meet on Zoom, we have a one-on-one. It goes well. They're very communicative. They have all the soft skills, but I think that they don't grasp what I'm doing outside of the meeting with like other people, like to create like a social cohesion of like building a company. I just feel like it's, and I'm not even blaming them because I kind of get it, because they don't go to the office. In an office environment, you would probably see the operator moving around, talking to all these people, having all these one-on-ones. And you would at least, and I only say that because I had that when I was 25. I worked in an office and I watched like the 35, 38 like CEOs at that time. I watched their day and I was like, oh, I'm happy I don't have to do that. I remember like,
Yeah.
right? Because I wasn't like my time in the sun, let's just say. I was younger, I was an operator, and I was happy with my coworkers doing that thing. Now, like 10 years later, that I'm in that position, but I'm doing it online. Um, I'm just working with all these people, and I'm like, I feel like you should go watch, like sit in an office and just watch somebody that has a lot of responsibility, like navigate their day. Because I don't think that you have a perception of what that person is actually doing day to day consistently. The amount of like stuff that they're probably going over to keep the lights on and keep everything moving. And it's not even a bad thing. You can't understand that unless you go watch somebody.
Yeah, actually in person. Yeah.
Yeah, like see it. So it's like I don't know what these young, like I don't know. It's yeah, it's a disservice to them. But I actually feel like it's starting to change a little bit because most companies are starting to realize that it's not that you can't do work. It's that like we're kind of doing a disservice to the younger generation to not force them to come in to kind of see, like with their own eyes, what
Mhm.
consistency actually looks like from people who have a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, yeah, for real, for real. Yeah, back on site. That's what it means, or at least a hybrid work setup. We
Yeah.
do need that human interaction, and virtual is kind of like a knockoff. It's not the real thing. I guess it kind of gets the job done partially, but there's something that happens when a human being is in front of another human being. There's a deeper connection that takes place that can't be done through technology, right? What's this? There's nothing behind here. Like
Yeah.
there's a flat screen, right? And
I
you're
think
thousands of miles away.
the danger is that you start thinking that your perception is reality when it's not.
Hmm. Ooh.
Like there's perception and then there's reality. And if all you see is your perception, you eventually start thinking that that's reality because you
Reality,
kind of said that.
the
Now, if you were
matrix.
in the office, you would probably be seeing a lot of other conversations and like seeing things that you would start second guessing maybe your perception because you would have more data. But you don't get any of that data. You just don't. So all you have is your perception. And then after enough time, you're like, well, I understand what's going on. I've seen this a lot of times with people I've worked with. I like to say it's the even going back to like pattern recognition and self-reflection, those two things, the other component that I've at least seen from different generations, this isn't just young people. Some people are not very good at like group think. Like especially you can understand like even in Pursue networking. Like I've worked with people who are not curious at all at the group dynamic of like what I'm doing. They're just not curious because they're like so siloed in like their operations of what they've done that that's fine. And we meet and I share it with them. But because of that, I feel like what happens is it's kind of like, slight things change. But if you're not curious, then like a year later, your perception of like what's going on is literally so foreign to like what's actually going on for so many reasons that we got that I've parted ways with people because it's like, look, this is getting too complicated for me to explain to you what is going on. And it's okay that you care in a nice way just about your perception. And I'm not saying you're doing a bad job. It's your perception is not reality. It's like literally not reality. Like I don't know what it's to say. Like you say things and I'm just like, no, that's not what happened. I don't know what to say. Like it's just it's confusing. And it starts off, it's hard that the gap isn't usually far from perception and reality. Then it like grows and grows and grows. Because of like the online distance thing and time
Yeah.
zones
That's the
that
beginning of insanity, by the way. When your
yeah.
perception is out of line with reality.
Yes. That's actually been one of the more challenges of growing Pursue networking and why I've shared with you offline about like how I kind of want to anchor back in Atlanta is because of those types of things. I've been in so many situations where it's just like, it's a lot harder than it seems to grow teams through Zoom. I'm not saying it's impossible. I've done it, but it requires such a high level of communication and finding specific people who are also highly communicative and like naturally curious. Because like what I found is when people aren't like naturally curious, to be honest, I'm not even really thinking about what their perception is. And then like 6 months will go and they'll say something. And it's like shocking at how far apart we are because of, like the client work is different than what we thought. I don't know. It just gets so confusing that it's like,
Mhm.
well, that type of stuff probably would never happen if everybody was just in an office because it's like we're all operating under the same set of facts and it usually makes its way around. With confidence versus like being like, did I ever tell him or her that detail about what the client said about that? And it's like, no. 3 weeks later, they're still doing things that like it's not even relevant anymore. They think something is more important than it actually is for a variety of reasons that I'm
Yeah.
not even aware of. That perception of reality starts to blur over time.
Yeah. Over communication is then needed.
Yeah, well, it's the answer
Yes,
So I'm
sir.
not saying it's impossible, but then I start realize, like, to be honest, that's why I have done it, because I'm an over communicative type of person. That's how I was able to do this. But I've started to realize that to expect that from other people is challenging. Well, it's also not even fair, to be totally honest. Versus being over communicative, letting people know, and then also, at the end of the day, trying to serve in that capacity of like continuing to be over communicative. That's as the company grows, but I feel like it's impossible. Like it's a standard that I can't even reach at, because it's like you can't communicate with everybody. At a certain point, you kind of need other people to communicate with other people, and things to be disseminated in some cadence that you have like comfortability that people are getting the information, so they're
Yeah.
all operating in the same reality.
Hmm. Yeah, decentralize, I guess, the flow of communication, and even a little of the decision making as well. Like move it from the center to the periphery,
Yeah.
so we can all operate effectively in the ecosystem that we're in. This has been a great show, a
Yeah, it was good.
great conversation for sure, Colin.
Yeah. I'm excited for in the next few weeks. Just like as an aside, I do have some the guests that I have in mind that have been talking to, or I would say just based off of our conversation, is all people who are interested in growing personal brands. So yes, I know people who I will invite onto the show too, and I know you have some too that are growing businesses. But the conversations that I've had with people, or a lot of people are very excited about this AI stuff and like how they could use it to basically think about creating like a content strategy for themselves, which, my answer, that's how they wanted to talk to me about. So my answer to them was, why don't you come on my show? We'll interview you. And then it makes it actually, to be honest, a lot easier to then show you a little bit more about how we're doing it, to be able to then give you some content to say go post. So I actually thought that angle was very organic, and they were not only want to do it, but they were like, oh, that's actually a really good idea of like what you guys have in mind on like helping people kind of create personal brands that way.
Yeah. All right. Cool. All right. Well, this has been good stuff. Let's chat some more next week, Colin. And
Sounds good.
yeah, and let's talk about who we can invite on first as a guest. And